Vivian Vance and William Frawley undeniably charmed millions of television viewers as the beloved, perpetually bickering, yet ultimately devoted neighbors, Fred and Ethel Mertz, on the groundbreaking and historically significant sitcom, I Love Lucy. This iconic show dominated the airwaves from 1951 to 1957, largely defining the golden age of television. Yet behind their impeccable comedic timing and what appeared to be effortless on-screen chemistry, a starkly different and far less amicable reality festered. Vivian Vance, by numerous accounts, reportedly loathed William Frawley with a profound and unwavering intensity. Dear viewers, before continuing this video, we kindly ask you to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you want to receive notifications about new video releases, please hit the bell icon. Thank you for your understanding. Their acrimonious off-screen relationship evolved into one of Hollywood's most notorious and enduring feuds, a bitter saga characterized by deep-seated resentment and mutual disdain. What truly transpired behind the carefully constructed scenes of this beloved television classic is a compelling and often uncomfortable story, one that Hollywood, for many years, actively attempted to brush under the proverbial rug or dismiss as mere on-set friction. Once the layers of time and carefully managed publicity are peeled back, and the reasons for Vivian Vance's deep-seated animosity towards William Frawley are more fully understood, particularly in light of certain actions, attitudes, and professional circumstances attributed to him, the way audiences perceive their iconic and cherished television pairing might irrevocably and perhaps uncomfortably change. The genesis of this infamous and long-lasting feud can, in many ways, be traced back to the very first day on set, or rather, to the complex, often fraught, and somewhat serendipitous casting process for the two pivotal supporting roles in I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball, the comedic genius driving creative force and undisputed star of the show, was meticulously and with great personal investment setting up her brand-new television venture, a venture that, unbeknownst to anyone at that nascent stage, would go on to become a straight-up, paradigm-shifting television phenomenon, forever altering the landscape of situation comedies. As they were painstakingly putting the crucial puzzle pieces of this new show together, one by one, Lucy, being the visionary and inherently assertive boss babe that she was, possessed a remarkably strong and clear artistic vision for her creation. She knew precisely who she ideally wanted for the pivotal role of Ethel Mertz, her on-screen best friend, confidant, and long-suffering landlady. Her absolute first choice for this critical part was, in fact, the exceptionally talented and already well-established character actress Bea Benaderet. However, in a classic Hollywood twist of fate that would significantly alter television history, Bea Benaderet was, at that precise moment, already contractually booked and exceptionally busy with other professional commitments. She simply couldn't take on the demanding role of Ethel. This was, undoubtedly, a significant initial disappointment for Lucille Ball, who had envisioned Benaderet as her perfect comedic foil. Undeterred by this early setback, Lucy moved on to her plan B, pragmatically thinking, why not call up her good friend, the equally talented character actress Mary Wickes? They shared a genuine and warm personal friendship, and Mary Wickes certainly possessed the formidable comedic chops and versatile acting prowess required to pull off the role of Ethel Mertz brilliantly. But in another surprising and somewhat unconventional turn of events, Mary Wickes actually declined the potentially career-making offer. Her reason was not a lack of desire for the promising gig, but rather because she valued her personal friendship with Lucille Ball too much and reportedly feared that working so closely together under the intense pressures of a new and untested television show might inadvertently introduce an element of professional weirdness or undue strain into their cherished personal bond. such profound loyalty and prioritization of friendship in the notoriously competitive and often cutthroat world of show business is indeed a rare and truly admirable quality. Meanwhile, Lucy's husband, the charismatic and multi-talented Desi Arnaz, was deeply and actively enmeshed in the myriad complex logistical and creative challenges of the show's production behind the scenes. He was, it is crucial to understand, far more than just the on-screen persona of the lovable Cuban bandleader Ricky Ricardo. Desi held serious and considerable creative and financial sway in the overall production process, and was fighting tenaciously and with great determination to get every single aspect of the casting absolutely right, keenly understanding its critical and fundamental importance to the show's potential for success and longevity. At one particularly crucial juncture in the casting process for the character of Fred Mertz, Ethel's curmudgeonly husband, Lucille Ball had fondly recalled her positive experience working with a classic and highly respected character actor named James Gleason on a film titled Miss Grant Takes Richmond. She strongly felt that Gleason, with his particular comedic style, his established persona, and his proven acting abilities, would be absolutely perfect for the pivotal role of the grumpy but ultimately lovable landlord, Fred. They had reportedly vibed well together professionally during their previous collaboration, and she clearly saw his immense potential in the part, envisioning him as the ideal comedic partner for her chosen Ethel. But what ultimately and unfortunately messed up that promising casting possibility was Gleason's unexpectedly high salary request. He reportedly asked for a staggering $3,500 per episode. In the economic context of the early 1950s, that was an absolutely enormous sum of money, especially for a supporting role in a brand new and as yet unproven television show. The studio executives, responsible for the show's budget, were unequivocally and immediately like, absolutely not. There was simply no room for negotiation at that figure. So, once again, the production team found themselves frustratingly back at square one in their increasingly urgent search for the perfect actor to portray Fred Mertz. And then, seemingly out of the blue and quite unexpectedly, William Frawley decisively entered the picture. At a seasoned 64 years of age, Frawley was a bona fide vaudeville legend, a true veteran of the entertainment industry, with an impressive resume that included nearly 100 film credits to his already distinguished name. The man was, for all intents and purposes, practically a Hollywood institution in his own right. He didn't passively wait by the phone to be called or discovered for the role by some casting director. No, William Frawley, with characteristic assertiveness and professional acumen, picked up the telephone himself and directly called Lucille Ball to express his keen and unequivocal interest in the part of Fred. CBS executives, however, were reportedly far from enthusiastic about this prospect. They apparently didn't want him for the role. By that stage of his long career, Frawley had unfortunately cultivated a rather notorious and widespread reputation in Hollywood for being a bit of a heavy drinker. Or to be more precise and less euphemistic, quite a lot of a drinker. This reputation for unreliability understandably made the network executives extremely hesitant to cast him in a demanding, regular series role. But the ever-resourceful and often daring Desi Arnaz, who saw something in Frawley that perhaps others overlooked, passionately and effectively went to bat for him, strongly advocating for Frawley to be given the chance to prove himself. Desi, however, was also a shrewd businessman and was no fool when it came to managing talent and potential risks. He made William Frawley sign a legally binding contract that basically stipulated, with no room for ambiguity or misunderstanding, if you show up to work drunk, even once, you're out. Period. It was a clear and uncompromising instance of professional tough love. And remarkably, Frawley, despite his age and established career, readily agreed to these stringent and somewhat humiliating terms. That's how badly he wanted, and perhaps financially needed, the role of Fred Mertz. A role that would, ironically, grant him television immortality, while simultaneously fueling one of its most legendary off-screen feuds. One might naturally assume that working day in and day out on one of the most beloved, critically acclaimed, and historically significant television shows ever created would inevitably bring the principal cast members closer together, fostering a deep sense of camaraderie, shared purpose, and mutual affection. But behind the meticulously crafted comedic scenes and the carefully projected image of familial harmony on I Love Lucy, something entirely different, something far more acrimonious, was insidiously brewing. Something that most adoring fans and casual viewers at the time likely never saw coming or could have even imagined. Vivian Vance, as it turned out over the course of the show's production, simply couldn't stand her on-screen husband, William Frawley. And it is crucial to understand that this wasn't merely a case of mild on-set bickering, occasional artistic differences, or the typical friction that can sometimes arise between co-stars working in close proximity under pressure. This was, by all contemporaneous and subsequent reliable accounts, a deep-seated, full-blown, and unresolvable animosity. But the real, lingering, and endlessly fascinating question remains: why? What truly and definitively happened between these two exceptionally talented and accomplished actors who so convincingly and hilariously played a lovable, albeit constantly bickering, married couple on screen for millions of devoted viewers, yet reportedly couldn't even bear to be in the same room with each other once the cameras stopped rolling and the stage lights dimmed? A significant and foundational component of the intense and enduring bitterness that existed between Vivian Vance and William Frawley stemmed directly from the considerable and visually apparent 22-year age gap that separated them. William Frawley was a seasoned and undeniably older 64 years of age when I Love Lucy commenced its historic and incredibly successful television run in 1951, while Vivian Vance, his on-screen wife, was a comparatively and visibly youthful 42. This wasn't just a minor or easily overlooked age difference. It represented an entire generational divide, a chasm in life experience and physical appearance that Vivian Vance, in particular, found deeply unsettling and professionally problematic. As Vance herself reportedly perceived and sometimes openly lamented, Frawley, her scripted spouse, could have plausibly and quite believably been her actual father, not her on-screen husband, a casting reality that deeply and consistently unsettled her throughout the show's tenure. Initially, during the early days of production, their interactions were reportedly cordial, if not overly warm, characterized more by a necessary professional courtesy rather than any burgeoning signs of genuine personal affection or friendship. There was, at that stage, no immediate or overt drama, no explosive on-set confrontations that signaled the depth of the animosity to come. But then, as the show settled into its routine, Vivian Vance began to notice something about their on-screen pairing that she simply couldn't unsee, ignore, or internally reconcile. She would look at herself, still undeniably youthful, strikingly beautiful, and very much in her professional and personal prime. And then she would cast her gaze over at William Frawley, whom she increasingly perceived as grumpy, visibly aging, and to her eyes, physically unappealing as a romantic lead. She would reportedly think, with a growing sense of dismay and professional frustration, seriously? This is the man I'm supposed to be convincingly portraying as my husband? Week after week? She even reportedly voiced this deeply felt sentiment aloud during rehearsals on at least one notable occasion, exclaiming with some exasperation, "Nobody in America will ever believe I'm married to that old goat," and unfortunately for the future of their working relationship, and perhaps for the overall harmony of the set, William Frawley reportedly overheard her cutting and deeply personal remark. One can only begin to imagine the palpable and immediate tension that must have permeated the "I Love Lucy" set in the aftermath of that unfortunate and revealing incident. In all fairness to Vivian Vance, her perspective, while perhaps bluntly expressed, is certainly understandable from a professional standpoint. She was an exceptionally talented and accomplished actress, then in her early 40s and arguably just hitting her full professional stride and comedic peak. And yet, she found herself contractually bound and professionally typecast to be the on-screen wife of a man significantly her senior, a man whose physical appearance and perceived energy levels did not, in her view, align with her own, or create a believable romantic or even companionate pairing. Meanwhile, her closest friend on the set, the vibrant and dynamic Lucille Ball, was radiantly out there on the same soundstage, brilliantly playing a glamorous, vivacious, and often endearingly mischievous wife to the incredibly handsome, charming, and age-appropriate Desi Arnaz. The visual and dynamic contrast between the two central on-screen couples was, to many observers, and most certainly to Vivian Vance, glaringly obvious and perhaps a constant, unwelcome source of professional frustration and deeply personal dissatisfaction for her. The show's producers and network executives, it seemed, didn't make the already challenging situation any easier for Vance either. They reportedly, and quite deliberately, went out of their way to actively frump her up for the role of Ethel Mertz, consistently dressing her in less flattering, often ill-fitting, and decidedly matronly dresses, applying dowdier, less glamorous makeup, and generally ensuring that nothing about Ethel's on-screen appearance was overtly chic, glamorous, or particularly attractive, especially when compared to the always vibrant and fashionably dressed Lucy Ricardo. Their primary intention, it is widely believed, was to make the character of Ethel Mertz look decidedly plain, almost dowdy, when standing next to the effervescent and always fashion-forward Lucy Ricardo, thereby enhancing Lucy's visual appeal as the show's star. In this specific aim, they undeniably succeeded, but in doing so, they also, slowly but surely, and perhaps unintentionally, chipped away at Vivian Vance's personal confidence, her professional self-esteem, and, quite possibly, her overall sanity and enduring job satisfaction during the show's long and demanding run. It is also a crucial and often overlooked fact that Vivian Vance and Lucille Ball were actually quite close in age in real life, a reality that likely made the on-screen disparity in their respective romantic pairings even more pointed and perhaps personally galling for Vance. To Vivian, it must have often felt like a cruel and ongoing professional joke. Here's your dear peer and closest friend, getting to embody the role of the pretty, desirable, and excitingly unpredictable wife in a seemingly endless series of fun, romantic, and often hilariously zany comedic storylines, while you are consistently relegated to playing the perpetually frumpy, often nagging, and decidedly unglamorous sidekick. Furthermore, she was trapped in what appeared to many viewers, and certainly to Vance herself, as a stale, unbelievable, and decidedly unromantic television marriage with a man who was, in terms of age and appearance, old enough to be collecting Social Security benefits. This wasn't merely a matter of vanity for Vivian Vance. It was, more fundamentally, about her professional dignity, her future career trajectory, and the very real and professionally damaging fear of being perpetually typecast in undesirable, limiting, and unfulfilling roles. That kind of persistent and daily professional frustration isn't just mildly annoying, it can be genuinely and profoundly soul-crushing for any dedicated performer. And the television audience of the 1950s? Oh, they certainly noticed the often awkward dynamic between Fred and Ethel, too. People began whispering amongst themselves, with some contemporary television critics and everyday viewers even openly remarking that the Fred and Ethel Mertz marriage often looked entirely fake, resembling, in their words, a miserable, sexless relationship. And Vivian Vance? She undoubtedly felt and internalized that public and critical perception very keenly. Every single time she was required to shoot a scene where her character, Ethel, was supposed to exhibit some semblance of genuine affection or romantic inclination towards Frawley's Fred, it was reportedly, for her, an exercise in supreme discomfort, akin to being forced to swallow a mouthful of sour lemon juice. She would, according to many on-set accounts and later biographies, straight up refuse to genuinely or convincingly kiss him on camera. She became, out of sheer necessity, an absolute master of the subtle and often deceptive air kiss, those cleverly staged and camera-angled near kisses that can look almost real to the viewing audience, but in reality involve no actual or meaningful lip contact whatsoever. There's a particularly notable and often cited scene in the classic I Love Lucy episode titled Equal Rights, where Fred and Ethel are supposed to share a kiss while humorously confined together in a jail cell. If one watches that specific scene closely and with a discerning eye, their palpable lack of genuine affection and the underlying discomfort between them is almost painfully apparent. There's not even a convincing peck on the cheek exchanged between them, just some visibly awkward, cold, and unconvincing body language, coupled with an almost perceptible eye roll from Vivian Vance that practically screams to the audience, "I simply cannot believe I have to go through with this charade yet again." And let's not for a moment forget William Frawley's significant and often retaliatory role in this escalating and deeply entrenched feud. He wasn't exactly the type to let Vivian Vance's evident disdain for him or her cutting old goat comments simply slide by unnoticed or unanswered. Oh no. He was, by many contemporaneous and subsequent accounts, equally, if not more, petty and demonstrably prone to engaging in various forms of on-set retaliation. He would reportedly go out of his way, sometimes subtly and sometimes not so subtly, to ensure that the show's talented writers threw occasional pointed verbal jabs specifically aimed at Ethel's character within the scripts. These were often lines that poked fun at Ethel's physical appearance, such as the now infamous and oft-quoted line referring to her figure as looking like a sack full of doorknobs, or lines that made light of her perceived nagging tendencies or other supposedly unappealing character traits. Savage, right? But here's the truly bizarre and, from a comedic perspective, almost perverse kicker. This very real, deeply personal, and often quite palpable underlying animosity between the two actors somehow, almost perversely, worked absolute wonders for their on-screen comedic dynamic. That biting, almost tangible tension that existed between them translated almost miraculously into comedic gold on the television screen. Their frequent and often hilariously over-the-top on-screen arguments felt remarkably real, incredibly sharp, and hilariously relatable to audiences precisely because, well, in many fundamental ways, they were real. That wasn't always just skilled and polished comedic acting on their part. That was often straight-up, unadulterated, and thinly veiled loathing, cleverly wrapped and skillfully presented within a scripted comedic framework. And the television audience of the 1950s, largely oblivious to the intense off-screen bitterness and simmering resentments, absolutely ate it up with a spoon, consistently making Fred and Ethel Mertz one of the most iconic, beloved, and enduring supporting couples in the entire history of television. But deep down, that kind of persistent day in day out negativity and professional friction inevitably and profoundly eats away at a person's spirit. For Vivian Vance, it wasn't merely about the occasionally hurtful on-screen jokes or the consistently unflattering and frumpy costumes she was made to wear as Ethel. It was, more fundamentally and painfully, about being perpetually and inextricably attached, both professionally and in the public's perception, to a specific character and a deeply uncomfortable professional relationship that she found personally demeaning, artistically limiting, and emotionally exhausting. She felt, with growing frustration, that she simply couldn't escape the long and pervasive shadow of Ethel Mertz, this older man's perpetually nagging, unglamorous, and often downtrodden wife, no matter how far or how hard she tried to run in her subsequent and varied professional career. That iconic and globally recognized television role, for all its attendant fame and financial security, ultimately stuck to her like the proverbial gum on the bottom of a shoe, often preventing her from being seen or cast in other, more diverse or glamorous roles that she deeply desired. And every single time she looked back on the monumental and undeniable success of I Love Lucy, a show that had made her a household name, she didn't just see the widespread global laughter, the critical acclaim, and the financial rewards. She also acutely and painfully remembered the significant personal and professional sacrifices she had felt compelled and often pressured to make in order to keep that particular character alive, believable, and consistently funny, week after week, for 6 long and demanding seasons. And consider this as a powerful testament to the depth of her feelings. When CBS, astutely recognizing the immense and enduring popularity of the Mertz characters, approached Vivian Vance and William Frawley with the tantalizing and potentially highly lucrative idea of creating a Fred and Ethel spin-off television show, it was, by any industry standard, a very big deal, a huge and almost guaranteed opportunity for continued success. There was, according to reports, serious and substantial money on the table, with some accounts suggesting a hefty $50,000 bonus for each of them just to sign on and make the new show happen. And Vivian Vance's response? She said unequivocally and without a moment's hesitation, "No. Not happening. Not for love, not for money, not for any conceivable reason." She simply could not and would not fathom the very idea of spending even more intensive and prolonged working time almost exclusively with William Frawley, especially, as she reportedly felt, without the crucial mediating and often peacekeeping presence of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who had frequently acted as vital and necessary buffers between the two perennially feuding co-stars on the original I Love Lucy set. One has to imagine the sheer force of will and depth of conviction required to turn down that kind of substantial financial windfall and a near-guaranteed successful television show, simply because the very idea of continuing to work closely with a particular colleague again makes one's skin crawl with dread. That powerful, unwavering, and ultimately career-shaping refusal tells you everything you truly need to know about the profound depth of her animosity and her desperate need for professional and personal liberation from that particular dynamic. Her desire to move beyond the Ethel Mertz persona, a character intrinsically linked to Frawley's Fred, was paramount. Playwright Kim Powers noted that Vance often questioned if being Lucy's sidekick was her ultimate destiny, yearning for roles that offered greater range and a different spotlight. Later years, a perception that only served to deepen their already profound mutual dislike. William Frawley passed away on March 3, 1966. His death didn't just mark the end of a long Hollywood career. It quietly closed the curtain on one of television history's most acrimonious and unreconciled feuds, the one between him and his I Love Lucy co-star, Vivian Vance. For 15 years, encompassing the original series and subsequent specials, they had professionally, if not personally, navigated their roles as Ethel and Fred Mertz, often masking their deep mutual disdain with comedic brilliance. When Frawley, aged 79, succumbed to a heart attack, the news reached Vivian Vance while she was reportedly dining at a restaurant. One might have expected a moment of somber reflection, a polite expression of condolence for a long time, albeit difficult, colleague. Instead, Vance's reaction was anything but conventional. Upon hearing the news, she allegedly clinked her glass and proclaimed to her dining companions, and perhaps to anyone within earshot, "Champagne for everybody." This was not a whispered aside. It was a public, almost celebratory declaration that instantly became the stuff of Hollywood legend. This extraordinary reaction wasn't born from a single slight or a minor disagreement. It was the culmination of years spent enduring Frawley's notorious drinking, his often abrasive personality, his reportedly sharp tongue, and what many described as a generally unpleasant demeanor that made their working relationship exceptionally trying for Vance. The show had been off the air for nearly a decade by the time Frawley died, yet for Vance, the bitterness had clearly not faded. The mere mention of his name, even in death, seemed to unleash years of pent-up frustration. Their on-screen bickering as Fred and Ethel was beloved by audiences who saw it as pitch-perfect comedy. Behind the laughter, however, was a genuine, raw animosity. That tension, that palpable dislike, was not acting. It's a stark reminder of how much personal discomfort can fuel public entertainment. Vance apparently never found closure with Frawley during his lifetime. There were no bygones be bygones moments, no late-in-life reconciliations. Her infamous champagne toast was not just a shocking quip. It was, in a very real sense, her final, definitive, and brutally honest word on a professional association she had endured, but clearly never cherished. It was a lifetime of frustration, released in 5 startling words, the most unvarnished farewell Hollywood had likely ever witnessed. As this video wraps up, we'd like to remind you to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support is vital for our channel's growth and helps us keep creating content. To be notified about new videos, remember to hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.